Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. Glad everyone attended today. Hope you enjoyed the morning and the lunch speaker. The lunch speaker, I was trying to understand the definition of generation, and I had some difficulties with that. I'm not sure if I was the only one. But as he talked about it, and I was evaluating my own assistant, who is a Gen Y person, and there's one other person in the room who knows her and is smiling at me. He hit it right on the head. She is not any of those things. She's a hardworking young lady. We have Mark Bowman to talk to us about the evolving senior care landscape. We were just reminiscing for a minute. I was trying to remember how I know Mark. I don't know how many of you know Randy Holmgren. He introduced us. Randy actually is in that business along with his legal practice, but in a different market. He introduced me to Mark because Mark has the home care assistance franchise in Salt Lake and Utah County. Mark is a former dentist. After practicing for 30-some years, after graduating from BYU and from University of Louisville, excuse me, he served as a mission president for the LDS Church. When he came back, was tired of putting his fingers in people's mouths, and started the home care assistance franchise. So at this point in time, he manages and oversees about 1,000 hours a week in senior health care, primarily focusing on homes, in their home. That obviously to some degree is the most expensive, probably the most pleasant. Certainly know my mother would prefer to be there than where I have her, but also the most difficult to manage. So without any more, Mark,
thanks, Bill.
Please welcome Mark with me.
Thank you. Good to be with you today. We appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and go a little bit about senior care. We appreciate the invitation from the council, and we hope that the time you find profitable today for the next hour or so. Let me start with, don't believe too much of what I say. This is educational. At the end, we should have some time for questions, but anything that's specific, you should talk to one of you people. Let's see by a show of hands, how many of you are estate planners, attorneys? Okay, how many financial planners? Okay, good. Elder law attorneys? Okay, good to be with you. Well, let's take a look a little bit about the playing field here. What's going on in senior care? Right now, as the baby boomers have started coming in to the 65 plus area, we have about 10,000 people a day right now in the US that are turning 65. This is probably even a more incredible statistic, is that 4,000 people a day are turning 85. And most of these people have some difficulties, frailty or chronic illnesses or things that they need help with, and that make everyday activities can be challenging. Right now we have about 40 million, I think it's actually, that statistic's 40, I think it's probably 45, it's probably a little closer, people in the US that are 65 or older, and we're on our way to really double that. So 2011, we started the baby boomers, or what's sometimes called the silver tsunami, started coming along and hitting 65. And so here's from 1900 to actuals in here and then projected out here. So you can see we're on the upward slope. How many of you are dealing with people on a regular basis that are 60, 65 or older? Okay, great. That's what I thought we'd probably see. I assume you're probably seeing people younger too, but this is probably pretty common age, is it not? 60 or so? Okay, good. So down here we have 85 and older, and here's what's projected. So here's millions. We're heading out here at about 90 million in 2050, and about pushing 20 million for 85 and older. So this is a group that all along has made an impact because of their sheer numbers that started getting born right after World War II. The interesting thing is, from a percentage standpoint, one of the biggest segments of increase of growth is in people that are 100 years old. In 1950, there was about 2,300, my memory serves me right, yeah, 2,300 by the census of 100 years, people that were 100 years old in the US. And then in the 2010 census, there was 53,000. It's estimated today to be 72,000. And, you know, about 14% of the population today is 65 or older. Well, let's talk here for a few minutes about senior care. This is really can be a confusing market. We take calls almost every day where people wonder what we do. I have to confess, 3 years ago, I had never heard of in-home care. And we, for quite a few years, had my mother actually living in our home and didn't know that this was even an option. We'd heard of home health, but not so much about in-home care. So in-home care, this is a licensed agencies. I think there's probably about 75 in Utah. They're licensed by the Department of Health, and there's certain regulations that are required to get that license. And there's certain things that are required to maintain it. For example, a licensed in-home agency, to start care, you have to have a registered nurse give you permission to start care on that person. I asked them when I started, would a dentist work, and they laughed and said no. So we use a nurse, an RN, and they have to sign off on it. I think primarily that's to make sure that we're not keeping somebody in-home care that maybe belongs in a higher level of care. Can everybody hear me okay? Nobody's straining, are they? If they are, I can use the microphone more, or I'll talk louder. Is everybody all right? Okay, good. An in-home agency, what we're doing here is normally what are called activities of daily living, or ADLs. These are non-medical types of tasks. They're things that would go along with the normal activities of daily living. So things like meal preparation, grooming, bathing, transportation, light housekeeping, laundry, those kinds of things. Normal activities of daily living. Anything that's medical is out of the purview of an in-home care agency. And sometimes this gets confused with in-home home health. We're probably more familiar with this one. Now, this graph is, you can see we've got cost of care up one side, we've got amount of care along the bottom. And in-home care runs quite a gamut. So the size of these little bubbles they're not about the size of the market, because there's a lot more people here than in here. But it's just to show you relative costs, and we'll lay this out. We'll see relative costs and amount of care. It's not exact, but I think it'll help give you kind of a feel for the lay of the market. So in-home skilled care, this is what's normally called home health. So home health is, to start this, you'd need an MD to sign off on this. And then you're going to have RNs visiting, or physical therapists, or occupational therapists. So they're skilled types of practitioners. The thing that can get a little confusing is, even in this arena of skilled care, they have an unskilled component. They have personal care aides that work for home health companies. And they're doing the same kinds of things that you would find in a home health agency, except their care is overseen by nurses. Generally, this component is, for people that are 65 and over, generally, almost universally, is picked up by Medicare. Now, if they have a secondary insurance, then maybe that kicks in, but Medicare is involved with almost all of these that are 65 and over. Now, there's also, out in the market, there's a group of in-home care agencies, but they use independent caregivers. Instead of caregivers, in this area, the caregivers are employees, or W-2'd. Here they're 1099. And so you can see the cost of that generally runs a little less. It covers the same kind of area for care, but because they're not matching the taxes and things, they can charge a little less. The thing we have to be careful about is who's picking up the workman's compensation on this, and making sure that taxes are getting paid. There's some question, I think, from some of you that are attorneys in here, you may even be aware of this. There's probably some question as to whether or not that would actually hold up. I don't know, but I'm glad I'm here, and all of our caregivers, we have about 50 right now that are out there serving people. They're all employees. I wonder here, because they're being told when to arrive, and they're using the different tools and things that are in the home, washers and dryers and dishwashers and things. And that same thing's kind of going on in this area. So there's also private hires, where clients go straight out and hire a caregiver. And of course, the advantage of this is that it can save some money because they're bypassing the agencies. And so I think that's why it's pretty common, actually, I think, here in Utah. This being more common than independent. But of course, most of these people are operating independent, and again, we have the questions that would come up. What would happen if either the client or the caregiver was injured on the job, or if maybe she slipped on the ice or something like that? So I think as we're providing advice and counsel to your clients, one of the things you might want to think about for these folks is the legal ramifications of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So then, of course, the lowest cost is family members. And of course, the care gamut, it can be anything from a few hours a day to around the clock, which is the same thing that happens with these agencies. These can be 2-3 hours a day, and they can be up to what we call live-in, which is 24 hours a day. In live-in type care, which goes on up in here, and with all three of these, the caregiver actually sleeps in the client's home. So there has to be a space for that. There has to be a bedroom and a bathroom or something for them to use. And so they'll get about 8 hours or so of the day where they're sleeping, and then in direct patient or client care, another 6 or 8, and then companionship. These kind of all go together. Probably familiar with some of those names. Respite care is often for family members. They just need a break. And so the respite care is being done in both facilities and with caregivers coming in for 3 or 4 hours and giving the family a break. It's really important that people have a break from the care, because this is, how many of you have been a caregiver or are a caregiver? It's demanding work, isn't it? And it's emotional, and you need a break. You need some time for yourself and catch your breath. And then, of course, retirement communities, you're familiar with, and active seniors. Independent living is where they would start to bring seniors into facilities. This can kind of be a gateway to assisted living. They'll come into an independent living, they're cooking their own food. They may have some social activities or maybe even an emergency bell that they can pull, but pretty much they're on their own. And then if they progress from here, they'll take them into an assisted living. Sometimes the companies have both of these facilities tied together. Sometimes they'll say, well, you need to get to an assisted living. Of course, assisted living we're all familiar with. Here in assisted living, they're starting to do, of course, again, assisted with activities of daily living, where in the retirement communities, independent living, they're not, but too much over here. But here we are. So a resident of an assisted living facility, you may get, depends on the ratios in the particular facility, but you may get a couple hours a day of one-on-one care. During the day, an assisted living facility may have a ratio of maybe 1 caregiver to 8 or 10 residents, and then at night that will drop down to maybe 1 in 20 or 25 residents. A facility for memory care, this is a facility where they can't get out, so that they're not wandering, and people that are in there are focused on helping people that have dementia or are in the latter states of dementia or memory problems, some cognitive problems going on in their lives. It's not uncommon for seniors to start over here in independent living, go to assisted living, and then end up over here and over time in the dementia or in skilled care. So we're back here with nurses and 24-hour supervision. This is kind of the highest level of care right through here. You can see that there's different options through this level of care, and of course, as you get out here, there's more expense generally. And then end-of-life care. This can be done either in a facility or in their home. A lot of our clients, probably about half the clients that we have some cognitive problems. So it's not unusual for one-on-one care that are done by caregivers in the homes to be handling situations with dementia also. But with end of life, you're back mostly being covered by Medicare, and there's some limits really to how much time they can spend there, the caregivers, which are coming out of the hospice company. So it's not unusual, say, for an in-home hospice company to kind of partner with a home health, and so there'll be home health and hospice. which is pretty common out there. And this company will often have an association with an in-home care agency because the Medicare isn't picking up enough hours to cover people in this arena. So maybe their Medicare will give them maybe 3 trips a week with a personal aide for an hour, because most of their trips are about an hour, and then maybe a nurse once or twice a week. But lots of these people need help 10 or 12 or 20 hours more a day. And so then these agencies are partnering with in-home care agencies to meet the needs of the senior. Well, let's talk just for a minute about private hire. This is pretty common around. I think it's pretty common all throughout the United States. I think the big advantage is the reduction of cost. And it can be pretty significant, up to, I would say, 25% or so. And so families to hold down their costs will basically become the employer, not really understanding the risks of being an employer. They think you're just going to write them a check. Well, that all works well as long as there's nothing stolen or turns up missing, and does your homeowners cover that or not? We're in an agency that's the caregivers are all bonded and insured. So then what happens when the caregiver wants some time off or is sick? Then who's covering those times? These are the kind of things that happen with private hires that we have to be careful to determine whether we're really saving money or not. Workman's comp insurance in this industry, it's a lot more expensive than in the dental industry. There's a lot more injuries going on with caregivers than there are dental assistants and hygienists. And so the costs of this range in the United States from about 3%, and that's where we are in Utah, one of the lowest actually, to maybe 12% of payroll in California. And so these claims are real. And I wonder and worry about people that have significant assets that want to save that 25% but are running the risk of a problem with an injury. And of course, then who's responsible with the taxes? I had a conversation just recently as I was chatting with one of our caregivers, and she said that we were talking about the rate for the daily rate for a day, because right now in the industry and agencies, when you have an hourly rate and you have what's called the live-in or the daily rate, and that makes it more affordable for people. So the hourly rate in Utah is about $22 an hour. That's the average. But when you get to a live-in rate, 24 hours, then that will drop down. And the caregivers, if they work in, say, a 4-hour shift, they would work hourly for every hour. But if they work live-in, they go on to a daily rate, at least right now. And so we were talking with one of our caregivers, who's one of our high-end caregivers. She does live in 5 days a week for us. And she was telling me that one of her friends does live in and make $5 a day more than her, which surprised me because I thought we were really at the top of our pay scales. But then I found out that the person was a private hire. And so then I had to explain to the caregiver that, we're matching your Social Security and the Medicare, Medicaid match, and so she understood it better. The other thing we have to keep in mind is that to be an agency in Utah, all your caregivers have to be background checked and screened. Please, sir.
What is the daily rate? You gave us the hourly rate. What's the daily rate?
Right now it's about $260, $270 a day is about a daily rate right now. In a minute, there's going to be some changes come to live in the 1st of January. So we'll talk more about that. But right now, it's about in that range, $260, $270. In Utah, all the caregivers have to be fingerprinted. Right now it's electronic. They've gone to an electronic fingerprint. And so those fingerprints are then reviewed by the FBI. It's not a rapid process, unfortunately. It's taking, 8 months or maybe even a year sometimes to get those things back. And so, of course, some of the agencies like us, we're doing our own background checks without fingerprints and getting those back in a few days so that we have a little more comfort, while the FBI does a complete background check. But this is required by the state of Utah for agencies where, of course, when somebody that's private hiring isn't going to be doing that. Okay, well, this gets us in sort of your question about the daily rate. We're all familiar with the Fair Labor Standards Act. In 1974, the Department of Labor issued an exemption to the Fair Labor Standards Act, and it was for companionship, which really made a $260, $270 rate become possible, more affordable for families. This exemption that has been in place now for about 40 years allowed so that a caregiver that was in a person's home for 24 hours a day and was not constantly working but sleeping and taking breaks and doing companionship did not need to be paid minimum wage and overtime for everything over 40 hours. But this is going to change though on January 1st because the companionship exemption is being revoked. And so as of January 1st, all caregivers that work for agencies will need to be paid minimum wage, at least minimum wage, and overtime for anything more than 40 hours a week. Now, in families, it doesn't affect them. Family members and private caregivers, they will still have access to the exemption, but there are some limitations, as you can see there. For example, they can't do more than 20% of their time in care. They can't do medical procedures. And so there's a lot of nuances in the law. But for agencies, for us, there is no wiggle room. Everybody will need to be paid minimum wage and 40 hours. So live in, you got 168 hours a week. So if you weren't going to do overtime, you'd need 4 or 5 caregivers. Now, this has already actually gone into place in about 16 states. It actually started, say, in California last year. So this has been going on in the country, but the federal law has everything happening for all the states here in January. Now, there is a lawsuit that's pending right now that was brought by the Home Care Association and the Franchise Association to try to stop the revocation of the companionship exemption. But I think it's an uphill battle, really. It looks like it's going to go in. The Department of Labor has said that they're not going to enforce it until July, but it still becomes the law January 1st. So this is one of the paragraphs out of the petition of the court to prevent the Department of Labor from removing the exemption. But at this point, it really looks like it's going to happen. Now, we went through that bubble graph. There are some people that are kind of professional navigators. They're what are called geriatric care managers. There's patient advocates. Geriatric care managers are more common. You may even know some of those that are professionally manage senior clients. Where geriatric care managers are social workers, they may be nurses. Patient advocates are generally nurses and more focused at the medical aspect. But these patient advocates are rare. There's only 250 right now in the United States, but it's an interesting profession because these people will go to the hospital with you, will be your intermediary between you and the doctor or the hospital. They'll be your advocate. And so these people are really help families or seniors to navigate this process. Well, we've all, familiar with what's going on with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. There's others too, but Alzheimer's is the primary one. And so right now we have about 43 million family caregivers treating about 15 million people in the United States with dementia. But the interesting thing is this graph showing the amount of time in different age groups that people are spending as a family caregiver. Look at this, this age group up here. I don't know how they do it, really. They've got to be pretty stout people, but they need help. So here we are right here. This is the Alzheimer's Association projections from where we're at now out to 2050. We're going from about 5 million with Alzheimer's now up to pushing 14 million. This is the 85 plus group, 65 to 75 in here, and 75 to 85 in here. So we can see that this is a real huge impact that's coming on our society, and we need to be ready for it. We need to get families financially prepared for it. Here's what's going on in Utah. 1 in 5, they say right now, that are 60 or over, that includes me, are saying have some perceived cognitive impairment. And a lot of these people live alone. They need help. What's interesting is, while Utah doesn't have a real high incidence of Alzheimer's, we're about average, we do have the second highest growth rate right now, and the Alzheimer's Association is saying that by 2025, we're expected to have the highest growth rate of Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, there's a couple of interesting non-pharmacological approaches that are going on. We're more familiar with the drugs, but these are a couple of things that are happening. This is really right here at the U, where this is being tested. It started in the East, where and you probably want to look at this maybe. What I'll put all these slides on my website if you'd like to access them, and they'll be up next week, and I can get you access to that. But this is really an interesting program where folks that are in the latter stages of dementia are listening to music that they have liked in their former life when they were younger. And it's bringing back people. There's actually, at the Sundance Film Institute this last year, they had a movie there that was called Alive Inside, which talks about this program, Music and Memory. This is a program that's actually put out by a research arm of Home Care Assistance. They've spent millions of dollars to develop this cognitive therapeutics method, and it's headed up by a neuropsychologist. And we've had some really interesting results. We've started this even here in Salt Lake. Well, I think this is probably worth reading. Let me give you an excerpt from a letter from a family that had been doing this for 4 months. His husband, we're doing it with his wife. His husband sent us this letter. It said, Sharon was diagnosed with dementia 6 years ago. Her mental and physical health has been declining more in the past year. She previously loved reading books, crocheting, working on jigsaw puzzles, helping grandchildren with homework, and she was a fanatic about cleaning. When I approached your service, Sharon had declined mentally and physically to a near sedentary state. All she wanted to do was sit in the chair, lie down, sleep. She would help me with cooking and watch 3 or 4 TV programs each week. I was unable to get her engaged doing anything requiring cognitive reasoning. Sharon's mental ability and cognitive reasoning have improved significantly. And so, And then he goes on and talks about how they really, he feels like this program's actually given back their mother for them for a while. And so this has been very, very rewarding. So there are some interesting things happening in the non-pharmacological area. Now let's talk a little bit about how we pay for this. So how many of you have heard of aid in attendance? Okay, a couple. That's a higher percentage than certainly in the population. And it's interesting that not very many of the vets who qualify for aid in attendance know this. This is really an important program. This pension has been in place for over 60 years. And it's a pension for vets that have served during an armed conflict, honorably discharged. There's some medical and financial eligibility that goes into it, some maximum amounts of assets and things that they can have to be eligible. But a lot of veterans, this really makes a difference in their lives. And they don't know about it. But we can help them to apply for this. It's fairly complicated. There's a lot of things they have to have. They have to have their discharge papers, marriage certificates, death certificates. They have to have a physician's evaluation. There needs to be a look at their bank accounts, what their assets are, those kinds of things. And then that can be put together by, do we have any accredited VA attorneys in here? Okay. That can be put together by an accredited VA attorney or through the Veterans Administration or companies this is actually a company that specializes in helping them. You can't charge for that service. That's the law. There's no charge for helping a vet, apply for the aid and attendance pension. But this can provide for a surviving spouse of a vet. January 1st, it will be about $1,150 a month in home care or help with other health-related events that aren't covered by Medicare. For a vet, it will be about almost $1,800, like $1,788, and for a vet without a spouse. For a vet with a surviving spouse, it'll be about $2,180 a month that this pension can provide. And I haven't seen too much of this, but there is a level for 2 vets that are married and surviving, and that's in about the $2,800 level per month. So these are real dollars that help people. I'd like to tell you a story about that, but I spoke too long. Go ahead, sir.
Your outline says that eligibility requirements, do they have a qualify, do they have to have a certain, they can't exceed a certain maximum?
That's correct.
Asset or income?
That's right, yeah. There's maximums for assets and income. But the house is not in that, a car's not in it. That's outside of it. And so there's a lot of people that, in fact, the Veterans Administration estimates that that about 2.5 million vets out in the country right now qualify for aid and attendance but don't use it. Well, this is a huge benefit for veterans that they don't even know about. We have to help them to understand this. This is another way we can pay for it. I got this information from Bill. So this is from Northwestern Mutual. They did a study that ended last year where they talked about what the average cost for home health assisted living. It's interesting to notice the national average, and here in Salt Lake, sometimes we think that, things are a little cheaper here. But yeah, that's right. They're really not, especially when it comes to labor. So these are average life expectancy costs if you during these periods of time. So long-term care insurance, here's premiums, averages for a mid-range policy. And the interesting thing here is that Northwestern Mutual projects that you have a 40% chance of using this insurance. That's pretty high. And here's what your losses could be without it. We would, at Home Care Assistance, we would say that probably at any one time, maybe 15 to 20% of our census has long-term care insurance. It gives them so many more options when they have it. Seniors, when they get moved out of their homes, their mental attitude, their psychology, their emotions, and start going downhill. They don't want to leave their homes, almost universally. And that can affect their overall health. And so moving from their home has a great deal of strain and leads to physical decline. Let me just read you a couple sentences from a study that was done. If you'd like this, just send me an email and I'll send you a link to it. This was a study that was done by Life Care Funding last year. In their summation paragraph, they said this: what has been observed by daily experience throughout the entire long-term care industry and supported by numerous studies is that individuals living in institutional care will have significantly shorter life expectancies than those in their contemporary living independently lifestyles. Mortality is not only driven by their condition, but also by the impact of the significant change in environment. There are intangible factors such as will to live, and tangible factors such as exposure to communicable diseases in the group environment that all come together to compress their life expectancy. Until very recently, actuarial tables and life expectancy calculations have ignored this well-known and well-documented fact. This is what we see, is that seniors get into the facilities. There's a lot more infectious disease going on in there, and so there's pneumonia problems and those kinds of things that start coming up and can end life in a shorter period of time. We like to call in-home care the best kind of assisted living because we assist seniors to stay in their own home. So you know my bias, so here it is. But let's take a look at costs on a national average. This is from a Genworth study that came out this year. Notice this is 44 hours a week of in-home care. So if a family was covering the weekends, and that was 5 days a week, it would be 8 or 9 hours a day. So you can bring a caregiver in the morning for 3 or 4 hours, and bring them back in the evening for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And you fix some breakfast and lunch before you go, and fix some dinner when you come back. And it really makes it so that this is very competitive with their ability to be in assisted living. And much more one-on-one care. In assisted living, they may get a couple hours a day of one-on-one care, where here they're getting maybe 7 to 9 hours a day of one-on-one care. Notice the projected increase on a national level. It's interesting that in Utah, this number right here, which is 1% nationally, in Utah, that's 3%. So I don't know why that is. This is what the study says, but I think 3% is really, I don't understand that 1% number myself, but that's what they said. I think 3% is more realistic, actually. 89% of Americans want to age in place. This is a survey from the AARP. What's interesting is when somebody gets old enough, even where they need day-to-day assistance, still 80% want to stay in their homes, even when they need help. Family caregivers need breaks. They need help. They're at risk of their own health and their own financial security. Here is a calculator that comes from the AARP that can help you project costs. You can put in the state, the metro area, and compare nursing homes with assisted living, with home care. And it'll project them out for you based upon right down to the location. And if you want that site, just send me an email and I'll send you the link to it. Here's what's going on in Medicaid from 1995 to 2012. And this is the percentage of home care in the total expenditure for long-term care in Medicaid. Everybody with me? Okay, so the whole expenditure is long-term care. What percentage of that is home-based? And we can see that what's going on, what the trend is, even in Medicare. This is the same trend that's going on in society. Seniors don't want to be warehoused. They want to live in their own homes where they have their social network in place, where they're going to church in their local buildings, and they have the neighbors, and they know where each other is supposed to be at certain times. Generally, they can kind of watch out for each other. Please, sir.
Will Medicaid provide in-home care?
Yes, but it's in the state of Utah. This is, well, here it is for all states. Okay, this is all the states. Here's the national average. Here's Utah. In Utah, they have contracts with 3 home care companies. We're not one of them, by the way. And so yeah, they're providing in-home care through Medicaid. If you want those companies, I can't think of them right now. I think one is Right at Home.
At-home personal care.
At-home personal care, okay. At-home personal care, but there's a couple of others, and I can send them to you because that's a wonderful option to keep people in their homes and still use Medicaid. Yes, sir.
I haven't checked on this recently, so this may have changed, but the last time I checked, in Utah, you could apply for a waiver. I think it was called an HCB waiver, Home and Community-Based Care Waiver. And if you got on the list and you qualified, then that would funnel those Medicaid dollars to your home care costs.
I don't know about that. Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is correct, but again, the amount of time that a private care provider through an agency can provide care is limited. So it may be a couple of hours, 3 to 4 times a week. It's not the large block of hours that a private pay would be.
Yeah.
And it's
Good, thank
Medicaid,
you.
not Medicare, right?
Pardon me? That's Medicaid.
That's
Yeah.
Medicaid.
That's
not
Medicaid.
Medicare.
That's
Medicare
correct.
does not do custodial.
You know, what's interesting though is that, as you see, there's quite a variance. We have, states down here that are, above 60 to pushing 80% of their dollars are in in-home care. And you've got other states that are lagging behind. Utah, we're right here in the middle. We're done?
If it's Medicaid, then obviously there are income and asset tests that you have to fall below.
Absolutely. Everything, all the requirements that would go into that. So home care is the trend. These are different functions that you see in home care. Different things that can be done, because sometimes we get confused. And for example, a personal care, home care, they're not checking for diabetes, they're not doing blood pressure checks. They're not giving medications. They can do medication reminders, which you see over here. The setup has to be done by the family or a nurse. But these are different tasks that are common types of tasks for home care. As you leave today, how many of you are aware of the Blue Book? Okay, good. Well, some of you are not. You'll want to pick one up. This is a free resource. It's printed for our area here in Utah and has lists of all the different kinds of agencies, from assisted living to nursing homes to home health companies to hospice to home care. For you that have some questions or people that maybe need some information about how to do care, especially for family caregivers, this is a book that's actually published by Home Care Assistance, the founders. It gives some tips on how to be a caregiver, how to handle different situations that commonly come up. These books, as well as, how many are familiar with the 55 Plus Guide from Salt Lake County? Okay, this is another one, and this has some other interesting things in it too, because it'll give you information like who's a dentist that will come to your home. You can get that in here, or different types of agencies that can help seniors. So these two books, as well as this one on your way out, they'll be out there on the back table. We have them laid out, and you can pick them up if you'd like. Let's remember that 90% of seniors want to stay in their home. Let's help them do it. Thank you.